The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the saloon, just as the sun began its descent behind the jagged peaks of the Sierra Nevada. And Catherine Wells pressed her gloved hand against the dusty window, her throat tight with the kind of fear that comes from running toward the unknown rather than away from something known. She had traveled for 3 weeks from Boston to reach Silver Creek, California, in this summer of 1872, leaving behind a life of parlor conversations and tea services to answer an advertisement for a schoolteacher in a mining town that probably did not care one bit about her education or her proper upbringing. The air outside shimmered with heat even as evening approached, and when the driver opened the door, the smell of horse manure, wood smoke, and something she could not quite identify but associated with frontier living hit her like a physical force. "This here's Silver Creek, miss," the driver said, offering his weathered hand to help her down. "Watch your step now." Catherine gathered her dark green traveling dress and accepted his assistance, her boots touching the packed dirt of what passed for a main street. Buildings lined both sides in various states of construction and decay, from the substantial 2-story hotel to her left to what appeared to be a half-finished general store to her right. Men in dusty clothes and wide-brimmed hats moved along the wooden walkways, and she felt every single pair of eyes turned toward her as though she were some exotic bird that had landed in their midst. "Your trunk, miss," the driver said, hefting her leather case down from the top of the coach. "Thank you," Catherine said, and even to her own ears her voice sounded wrong. It always had. Too low, too rough, as though she had spent years shouting across fields instead of learning proper elocution from Miss Penelope's Academy for Young Ladies. Her mother had despaired of it, had sent her to specialist after specialist in Boston, each one pronouncing that there was nothing physically wrong with her vocal cords, that she simply had an unusually deep voice for a woman. "My voice isn't proper for a lady," she had overheard her mother say to her father once, the shame in those words cutting deeper than any blade. "You need directions someplace?" the driver asked, already climbing back onto his perch. "The schoolhouse," Catherine said, "or the mayor's office." "I was told to report to Mayor Hutchins. Schoolhouse is that building yonder with the bell," he said, pointing down the street. "Mayor's probably at the saloon this time of day, or the mercantile. Someone will point you right." Before Catherine could ask anything else, the stagecoach was pulling away in a cloud of dust, leaving her standing alone on the street with her trunk at her feet, and the weight of perhaps the most impulsive decision of her life pressing down on her shoulders. She had turned 23 last month, and her mother had made it abundantly clear that time was running out for her to make a suitable match. But how could she marry when every potential suitor looked at her strangely the moment she spoke, when her voice seemed to unsettle people, when even her own family treated it as an affliction to be overcome or hidden? "You lost, miss." Catherine turned to find a woman standing nearby, perhaps in her 40s, wearing a practical calico dress and an apron dusted with flour. Her face was kind, weathered by sun and hard work, and her eyes held genuine curiosity rather than judgment. "I'm looking for Mayor Hutchins," Catherine said. "I'm the new schoolteacher, Catherine Wells." "Oh, thank the Lord," the woman said, her face breaking into a smile. "We've been expecting you for weeks. I'm Martha Dawson. My husband runs the mercantile just there." "The mayor is probably at his office, but let me fetch someone to help with your trunk." "Samuel," she called out, looking toward the building with the saloon sign. The doors swung open, and a man stepped out onto the walkway. Catherine's breath caught in a way that had nothing to do with the dust or the heat. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his faded blue shirt, and he moved with the kind of easy confidence that spoke of someone completely comfortable in his own skin. His hat shadowed his face until he looked up, and then she saw eyes the color of a summer sky, a strong jaw darkened with stubble, and a mouth that curved into something between a smile and a question. "Yes, ma'am," he said to Martha, his voice carrying across the space between them. This young lady needs help with her trunk. She's the new schoolteacher. The man's gaze shifted to Catherine, and she felt the impact of it like a touch. He studied her for a moment that stretched too long, then nodded and crossed the street with long strides that ate up the distance. Up close, he was even more striking, and Catherine found herself noticing details she had no business noticing. The way his dark hair curled slightly at his collar, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the calluses on his hands as he bent to lift her trunk as though it weighed nothing at all. "Samuel Hart," he said, settling the trunk on his shoulder. "Welcome to Silver Creek, Miss Wells." "Thank you," Catherine said, and hated the way her voice came out, that rough edge that made her sound like she should be singing in some bawdy house rather than teaching children their letters. She saw him register it, saw his eyes widen slightly, but he did not recoil or give her that look she had come to expect, the one that said she was somehow defective. "I'll take you to the mayor," he said. "Martha, is he at the office?" "Should be," Martha said. "Miss Wells, you come by the Mercantile tomorrow, and we'll get you sorted with whatever you need for the schoolhouse and for living. We've got a small room behind the school for the teacher." "Thank you, Mrs. Dawson," Catherine said, meaning it. She fell into step beside Samuel Hart, very aware of his presence, of the way people nodded to him as they passed. He seemed well-known, well-liked, and she found herself curious about him in a way that was probably not appropriate for someone she had met mere minutes ago. "How long have you been in Silver Creek?" she asked, because the silence felt too heavy. "About 5 years," he said. "Came out after the war looking for a fresh start like most folks. Worked the mines for a while, then started wrangling horses. Got a small ranch about 2 miles outside town." "A cowboy," Catherine said, and something about the word felt right on her tongue. "More or less," he said, glancing at her with something like amusement. "Though I prefer horse rancher, cowboy makes me sound like I'm still 18 and full of foolishness. How old are you?" The question slipped out before Catherine could stop it, and she felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I apologize, that was forward of me." 27, he said easily. "No offense taken, you're what, 20 or so?" 23, she said, practically a spinster by Boston standards. He made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Well, out here, you're just getting started. The mayor's office is right here." He pushed open the door to a small building that looked more like someone's house than an official office and called out, "Mayor Hutchins." The school teachers arrived. A portly man with impressive mutton chops emerged from a back room, his face lighting up when he saw Catherine. "Miss Wells, excellent, excellent. We received your letter confirming your arrival date, and we've been counting the days. The children have been running wild all summer with no proper education." Samuel set her trunk down carefully, and Catherine turned to thank him, but he was already tipping his hat to her. "Ma'am," he said simply, "I hope Silver Creek treats you well." Then he was gone, the door swinging shut behind him, and Catherine felt an odd sense of loss that made no sense whatsoever. She forced her attention back to Mayor Hutchins, who was already talking about the school schedule and the number of students she could expect, and the modest salary the town could offer. "The living quarters are simple but clean," he was saying, leading her out the back door and down a dusty path toward the building with the bell that she had noticed earlier. "Just one room with a stove and a bed, but there's a privy out back, and you can take meals at the hotel or the boarding house for reasonable rates. Mrs. Dawson will extend you credit at the Mercantile until you receive your first month's wages." The schoolhouse was indeed simple. A single large room with rough wooden benches, a blackboard at the front, and a desk that had seen better days. The room behind it, accessed through a narrow door, was barely larger than a closet, with a small iron bed, a trunk for storage, a table with one chair, and a pot-bellied stove that looked like it might actually heat the space adequately come winter. "It's not much," Mayor Hutchins said apologetically. "It's fine," Catherine said and meant it. It was hers. No mother hovering and criticizing, no father looking disappointed, no sisters whispering about her unfortunate voice. Just a room of her own in a town that needed her voice and all. When do I start teaching? School traditionally starts in September, but given that it's only mid-August now, you might want to take a few weeks to settle in and prepare. Although, he hesitated, if you were willing to start earlier, say next Monday, the parents would be grateful. Gives the children something to do besides get into trouble. Next Monday is fine, Catherine said. That gives me 5 days to prepare. The mayor looked relieved. Excellent, I'll spread the word. Oh, and Miss Wells, he paused at the door. We're a rough town, but we're decent folk for the most part. You'll be safe here. But if you have any trouble, any at all, you come to me or to Samuel Hart. Sam's one of the most respected men in Silver Creek. He'll see you right. After the mayor left, Catherine stood in the middle of her tiny room and let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Through the small window, she could see the main street, the mountains in the distance, and the vast sky that seemed to go on forever. It was nothing like Boston with its narrow streets and tall buildings and constant press of people. Here, there was space to breathe, space to be someone other than the Wells girl with the unfortunate voice. She spent the rest of the evening unpacking her trunk, arranging her few books on the small shelf by the bed, hanging her 3 dresses on the pegs by the door. She had a package of dried meat and hard cheese that Mrs. Dawson had pressed into her hands before she left the main street, and she made a simple supper of that with water from the pump outside. As darkness fell, she lit the oil lamp and sat at the small table, making lists of what she would need for the school, what lessons she would plan, how she would organize the children by age and ability. But her mind kept drifting back to Samuel Hart, to the way he had looked at her without judgment, to the easy strength with which he had carried her trunk, to the kindness in his eyes. She told herself it was simply because he had been the first person to show her genuine welcome, that she was reading too much into a simple act of assistance. But when she finally lay down on the narrow bed, exhausted from travel and the weight of new beginnings, it was his face she saw before sleep claimed her. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Martha Dawson proved to be an invaluable ally, helping Catherine acquire slates and chalk, primers and readers, paper and pencils. The town had a surprising number of children, Martha explained, from the miners and the ranchers and the various families that had settled in the area hoping to make their fortunes. We had a teacher last year, Mr. Patterson, but he took off for the gold fields in Nevada, Martha said as they arranged supplies in the schoolhouse. Left in the middle of the term without so much as a goodbye. Before that, we had a young woman, but she married one of the miners and moved to Sacramento. So you see, we're hoping you'll stay a while. I plan to, Catherine said. I have no reason to leave. She saw Samuel twice during those preparation days. Once, he was loading supplies into a wagon outside the mercantile, and he nodded to her with that same easy smile. The second time, she was sweeping the schoolhouse steps at dusk when he rode past on a magnificent black horse, and he reined in to ask how she was settling in. Well enough, she had said, very aware of how her voice carried in the evening quiet. Thank you for asking. If you need anything, my ranch is due west, about 2 miles out, he said. Anyone can point you the right way, or just ask in town and someone will find me. That's kind of you, Catherine said, and wanted to say more. Wanted to ask him questions about his life and his ranch and why he had come west. But he was already tipping his hat and moving on, and she was left with that same odd sense of disappointment. Monday morning arrived with cloudless blue skies and heat that already shimmered off the ground by 8 in the morning. Catherine dressed carefully in her most practical dress, a gray cotton that would not show dust, pinned her dark hair into a simple bun, and stood at the schoolhouse door with her heart hammering in her chest. She had wanted to be a teacher since she was a girl, had fought for the opportunity to attend normal school in Boston despite her mother's objections, had dreamed of having her own classroom. Now that moment was here, and she was terrified that she would fail, that the children would mock her voice, that the parents would complain. But the children came, shepherded by parents or older siblings, ranging in age from 5 to 15. 23 in total, Martha had told her, though not all would attend regularly due to harvest needs and family obligations. They filed in with the mixture of excitement and trepidation that children everywhere brought to the first day of school, and Catherine stood at the front of the room and felt the weight of their attention. "Good morning," she said, and her voice came out strong and clear despite its roughness. "My name is Miss Wells, and I am very pleased to be your teacher." She saw some of the children glance at each other, saw one of the older boys smirk, but she pressed on, explaining her expectations, her rules, her hope that they would learn together and help each other. She divided them by ability rather than age, which caused some grumbling but made practical sense, and launched into the first lessons of the day. By noon, when she dismissed them for lunch, she was exhausted but exhilarated. The children were bright and curious, and if some of them found her voice strange, they had kept their comments to themselves. She was eating her own simple lunch at her desk when she heard a knock at the door. "Come in," she called, expecting a parent with questions. But it was Samuel Hart who stepped through the door, hat in hand, looking almost sheepish. "Miss Wells," he said, "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," Catherine said, standing quickly and brushing crumbs from her dress. "How can I help you?" "Actually, I came to see if you needed help with anything," he said. "I was in town picking up supplies, and Mrs. Dawson mentioned you could use some repairs done around the schoolhouse. The steps are loose," she said, "and the roof has a leak." "Oh," Catherine said, surprised. "I hadn't noticed the steps, but yes, there's a spot in the corner where water drips when it rains. Mrs. Dawson mentioned it." "I'm handy with repairs," Samuel said. "If you'd like, I could take a look. No charge. We all want the schoolhouse in good shape." "That's very generous of you," Catherine said, "but I wouldn't want to take up your time." "It's no trouble," he said, and his smile was warm and genuine. "Besides, I have a vested interest. My sister's youngest, Emma, is one of your students, the girl with the red braids." "Emma Hart," Catherine said, remembering the bright-eyed 8-year-old who had answered every question with enthusiasm. "She's a wonderful student." "She's a handful," Samuel said with obvious affection, "but she's smart. Her mother, my sister Anne, died 2 years back, and her father isn't much good, so I've been helping raise her. Education is important." There was a story there, Catherine could tell, layers of pain and responsibility that he carried easily, but that must weigh on him nonetheless. "I'll make sure she gets a good education," Catherine said softly. "I know you will," Samuel said, holding her gaze for a moment that stretched and deepened. "You have a way about you. The kids were talking about you at lunch. They like you, even with my voice." The words slipped out before Catherine could stop them, and she wanted to snatch them back, hated that she had revealed her insecurity so baldly. Samuel's expression shifted, became something intent and serious. "What about your voice?" "It's not proper for a lady," Catherine said quietly, repeating the words that had haunted her for years. "It's too rough, too deep. People find it off-putting." She expected him to offer some platitude, some polite reassurance that meant nothing. Instead, he stepped closer, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his blue eyes, close enough to catch the scent of leather and sage and something essentially him. "It's perfect for my ears," he said simply, and the way he said it, with utter sincerity and not a trace of flattery, made something in Catherine's chest crack open. "I like your voice, Miss Wells. It's real, it's honest. There's nothing proper or false about it, and that's what makes it perfect." Catherine could not speak for a moment, could only stare at this man who had somehow said exactly what she needed to hear without even knowing how much she needed to hear it. "Thank you," she finally managed. "Just the truth," Samuel said, stepping back and settling his hat on his head. "Now, let me look at those repairs. I'll work quiet so the afternoon lessons aren't disturbed." He was true to his word, working on the front steps with barely a sound while Catherine taught arithmetic and reading to her students. When the school day ended and the last child had run off toward home, Catherine stepped outside to find the steps solid and secure, and Samuel climbing down from the roof with his tools. "The leak should be fixed now," he said, wiping his hands on his trousers. "If it acts up again after the next rain, let me know and I'll come back." "I don't know how to thank you," Catherine said. "No thanks needed," Samuel said, "but if you're walking back to the mercantile, I could walk with you. I'm headed that way myself." They fell into step together, and Catherine found conversation flowing easily between them. He told her about his ranch, about the horses he raised and trained, about the satisfaction of working with animals that were honest in their reactions. She told him about Boston, about the stifling society and the endless rules, about her love of books and learning and the joy of watching children understand a new concept. "Why teaching?" he asked as they paused outside the mercantile. "You could have done anything with an education like yours." "Because books saved me," Catherine said honestly. "When I was young and hated my voice and wanted to hide from the world, I could lose myself in stories. I could be anyone, go anywhere. I want to give that gift to children who might need it the same way I did." Samuel looked at her with such admiration that Catherine felt heat rise in her cheeks. "That's a fine reason," he said, "the finest I've heard." Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged. Samuel would find reasons to come into town, would stop by the schoolhouse to check on repairs or bring Emma some forgotten item, would walk with Catherine to the mercantile or the boarding house where she sometimes took dinner. They talked about everything and nothing, comfortable silences punctuated by laughter and increasingly personal revelations. Catherine learned that Samuel had fought for the Union in the war, that he had seen things that still haunted him, that he had come west to escape the memories and build something new. He learned that she had been engaged briefly in Boston, that the man had broken it off after meeting her family and hearing her mother apologize for Catherine's voice, that she had decided then that she would rather be alone than with someone who found her lacking. "He was a fool," Samuel said fiercely when she told him this story one evening as they sat on the schoolhouse steps watching the sun set. "Any man who couldn't see past something as meaningless as the pitch of your voice to the person beneath doesn't deserve you." "My mother would disagree," Catherine said with a wry smile. "She thinks I'm too particular, that I need to accept my limitations." "Your only limitation is that you're surrounded by people who can't see clearly," Samuel said. "Out here, nobody cares about Boston society rules. What matters is if you're honest and hardworking and kind, and you're all of those things." Catherine felt something shift between them in that moment, felt the air grow charged with possibility. She was intensely aware of how close Samuel was sitting, of the strength in his shoulders, of the way he looked at her as though she was something precious. Her heart was beating too fast, and she knew she should probably go inside, should maintain proper distance, but she did not want to. She wanted to stay here in this moment where someone saw her, really saw her, and liked what he saw. "Samuel," she started, not sure what she meant to say, but he was already standing, offering his hand to help her up. "It's getting late," he said, his voice rough. "I should let you rest." "School day tomorrow." She took his hand, feeling the calluses, the warmth, the strength, and let him pull her to her feet. They stood there for a heartbeat, hands still clasped, and Catherine thought he might kiss her. She wanted him to kiss her with an intensity that shocked her. But he simply squeezed her hand gently and stepped back. "Good night, Catherine," he said, using her first name for the first time. "Good night, Samuel," she replied, and watched him walk away into the gathering darkness. September arrived with cooler temperatures and the first hints that summer would not last forever. The school was thriving, the children were learning, and Catherine had found a place in the community. The women had accepted her, inviting her to quilting circles and church socials. The men treated her with respect, tipping their hats and asking about their children's progress. She had never felt more at home anywhere, and then there was Samuel. He was a constant presence in her life now, though they both danced around what was growing between them. He brought her firewood for the stove as the evenings grew chilly. She mended a tear in his shirt when he came to fix a loose board in the schoolhouse. They shared meals at the boarding house, took walks on Sunday afternoons, found excuses to be in each other's company. "You're courting," Martha Dawson said one afternoon as she and Catherine were sorting through fabric at the Mercantile. "You and Samuel Hart." "We're friends," Catherine said, but even she heard the uncertainty in her voice. "Honey, that man looks at you like you hung the moon," Martha said kindly. "And you look at him the same way. There's no shame in it. He's a good man, one of the best. Lost his wife in childbirth about 6 years back before he came here. Been alone ever since, far as I know." "You'd be good for each other." Catherine felt her heart clench. "He was married, long time ago, back in Missouri," Martha said. "He doesn't talk about it much, but folks know. The baby didn't make it either. It near about destroyed him. The war and then that. It's why he came west, I reckon. Too many ghosts back home." That evening, when Samuel came to walk her to dinner, Catherine looked at him with new eyes, seeing the shadows that he carried, the losses he had endured. They sat across from each other at the boarding house table, making small talk about the day, and she wanted to ask him about his wife, about his child, but could not find the words. It was Samuel who finally broke the comfortable pattern of their conversation. "Martha talked to you today?" he asked abruptly. "Yes," Catherine said cautiously, "about various things. About me, I'm guessing," Samuel said, setting down his fork. "About Sarah. She mentioned you had been married," Catherine admitted. "I'm sorry for your loss." Samuel was quiet for a long moment, his jaw tight. Then he sighed and met her eyes. "Her name was Sarah. We married young, right before the war. I went off to fight and she waited for me. When I came back, we tried to build a life, but I was different. The war had changed me. We struggled for a couple of years, and then she got pregnant, and we thought maybe that was what we needed, a fresh start with a baby." He paused, pain flickering across his face. "She was in labor for 2 days. The midwife did everything she could, but something went wrong. Sarah died, and the baby, a little boy, he died too. I held him for maybe 5 minutes before he stopped breathing." "Oh, Samuel," Catherine breathed, reaching across the table to take his hand. "I'm so sorry." "I left Missouri after that," he continued. "Couldn't stay in that house in that town with everyone looking at me with pity. Came west and told myself I'd never let anyone that close again. It hurt too much to lose them. And now," Catherine asked softly, "now I'm sitting here with a woman who makes me laugh, who makes me think, who makes me feel alive again," Samuel said, his grip on her hand tightening. "And I'm terrified, Catherine. Terrified that I'm going to mess this up, that I'm going to lose you somehow, that I'm too broken to be what you need." "You're not broken," Catherine said fiercely. "You're hurt, and that's different. We're all hurt in some way. I've spent my whole life feeling like I'm not enough because of something as stupid as my voice. We can be hurt together, can't we? And maybe heal together too?" Samuel looked at her with such raw emotion that Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. "I want that," he said roughly. "God help me, I want that more than I've wanted anything in a long time." "Then let's try," Catherine said. "Let's see where this goes." That night marked a turning point. Samuel began courting her openly, bringing her flowers from the meadows near his ranch, taking her riding on his gentlest mare, introducing her to the life he had built. Catherine saw his ranch for the first time on a crisp Sunday in late September, and it took her breath away. The house was simple but well built, sitting in a small valley with mountains rising on 3 sides. Corrals held beautiful horses that whinnied and trotted over when Samuel appeared, clearly devoted to him. "It's not much," Samuel said, suddenly shy, "but it's mine, ours if you want it to be." Catherine turned to him, this man who had lost so much and still found the courage to try again. "Are you asking me something, Samuel Hart?" "Not yet," he said, but his smile was full of promise. "But soon. I want to do this right, Catherine. I want you to be sure to know what you're getting into. Life on a ranch isn't easy. It's hard work and long hours, and sometimes the winters are brutal." "I didn't come west for easy," Catherine said. "I came for real, for honest, for a life that means something." "Then I'd say you found it," Samuel said. And this time when he leaned in, he did kiss her, gentle and sweet and full of all the emotions neither of them had quite found words for yet. October brought cooler weather and the first snow on the mountain peaks. Catherine's school was flourishing, and several parents had approached her about starting evening classes for adults who wanted to learn to read. She agreed enthusiastically, and Samuel helped her set up the schoolhouse for the additional sessions, bringing in extra lamps and helping arrange the space. He was there the first evening she taught the adult class, sitting in the back with 4 minors, 2 ranch hands, and 3 women who had never had the opportunity to learn their letters. Catherine felt his eyes on her as she taught, patient and encouraging, celebrating each small victory. When the class ended and the students filed out, full of enthusiasm and determination to practice, Samuel remained. "You're remarkable," he said, standing and crossing to where she stood by the blackboard. "You know that." "I'm just doing what I love," Catherine said, but she felt pleasure at his words. "You're changing lives," Samuel said. "Mine included. Catherine, I know we've only known each other a few months, but I'm 30 kinds of sure that I love you. I've loved you since the day you stepped off that stage and I saw something in you that called to something in me. I know I said I'd wait, but I can't anymore. Will you marry me? Will you take a chance on a cowboy with a rough past and an uncertain future?" Catherine's heart was so full she thought it might burst. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, Samuel, I'll marry you. I love you too. I think I have since you told me my voice was perfect for your ears." Samuel let out a whoop of joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her around in the empty schoolhouse. When he set her down, he kissed her properly, deeply, and Catherine felt like she was finally, truly home. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church on the edge of town, with what seemed like the entire population of Silver Creek in attendance. Martha Dawson cried happy tears and proclaimed it the most romantic wedding she had ever seen. Emma Hart served as flower girl and took her duties very seriously. Catherine wore a simple dress of cream-colored silk that Martha had helped her sew, and Samuel wore his best suit, looking handsome enough to make Catherine's breath catch. "I, Samuel Hart, take you, Catherine Wells, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said, his voice strong and clear. "I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish every part of you, including that perfect voice, for all the days of my life." Catherine's vows were equally heartfelt, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss Samuel gave her was tender and full of promise. The reception was held at the hotel, with music and dancing and more food than Catherine had seen since leaving Boston. She danced with her husband, feeling the strength of his arms around her, the solid reality of him, and thought about how far she had come from that frightened woman stepping off the stagecoach. "Happy," Samuel murmured as they swayed to the music. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Catherine said honestly. They spent their wedding night at the ranch, in the house that was now theirs together. Samuel carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing, and then suddenly the laughter faded, replaced by something deeper and more intense. He set her down carefully, and Catherine saw the question in his eyes, the concern that she might be nervous or frightened. "I'm not afraid," she said softly. "I trust you, Samuel. I love you." "I love you too," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "More than I ever thought I could love anyone again. You brought me back to life, Catherine." That night they came together as husband and wife, and Catherine discovered a passion and tenderness she had never imagined. Samuel was gentle and patient, worshipping her body with touches and kisses, murmuring how beautiful she was, how perfect, until Catherine believed him completely. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed, the moonlight streaming through the window, and Catherine felt a peace settle over her that she had never known. Life as a ranch wife proved both challenging and deeply satisfying. Catherine continued teaching, riding into town 3 days a week for regular school and 2 evenings for adult classes. The other days she spent at the ranch, learning the rhythms of this new life. She learned to cook on the wood stove, to tend the kitchen garden Samuel had started, to help with the horses when he needed an extra pair of hands. She learned the names of all the horses, learned their personalities and quirks, and found herself growing fond of them. Samuel was an attentive husband, patient with her inexperience, proud of her accomplishments. He bragged about her teaching to anyone who would listen, attended every school event, and helped her students with practical skills like horse care and basic carpentry. Together, they became a fixture in the community, hosting dinners at the ranch, helping neighbors with barn raisings and harvests, building a life that was richer than either of them had expected. Winter came hard that year, with snow piling deep and temperatures dropping below zero. The school closed for 2 weeks in January when the roads became impassable, and Catherine and Samuel were snowed in at the ranch. But rather than feeling trapped, Catherine found those weeks to be some of the happiest of her life. They spent long evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other, playing cards, talking about their dreams for the future. They made love in the warmth of their bed while the wind howled outside, and Catherine felt grateful for every moment. "I want children," Samuel said one night as they lay together. "I know that might be hard for me to say given what happened before, but with you I want to try. I want to fill this house with the sound of children laughing." "I want that too," Catherine said, her hand resting on his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her palm. "I want to give you the family you lost, Samuel. I want to build something beautiful together." "We already have," he said, pulling her closer, "but more would be welcome." Spring arrived with a rush of color and new life, and with it came news that made Catherine's heart soar. She was pregnant. The town doctor confirmed it in early April, and Catherine rode home to the ranch with her heart singing, planning how she would tell Samuel. She found him in the corral working with a young stallion, his movements sure and calm, and watched him for a moment, this man who had become everything to her. "Samuel," she called, and he looked up, his face breaking into a smile when he saw her. "You're back early," he said, walking over and leaning on the fence. "Everything all right? Everything's wonderful," Catherine said. "I'm pregnant, Samuel. We're going to have a baby." She watched the emotions play across his face, shock, fear, and then pure joy. He vaulted over the fence and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "Are you sure?" he asked against her hair. "The doctor is sure," Catherine said. "Probably due in early November." Samuel pulled back to look at her, and she saw tears in his eyes. "I'm terrified," he admitted, "but I'm also happier than I have any right to be. You've given me everything, Catherine, everything I thought I'd lost." "We're going to be fine," Catherine said with more confidence than she felt. "All three of us." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring and into summer. Catherine continued teaching until the end of the school term in June, then took the summer to prepare for the baby. Samuel was protective to the point of being comical, barely letting her lift anything heavier than a book, insisting she rest frequently. Martha Dawson and the other women rallied around her, offering advice and help, sewing baby clothes and knitting blankets. As her belly grew round with their child, Catherine saw some of Samuel's fear ease, replaced by wonder. He would place his hand on her stomach and feel the baby kick, his face full of awe. They talked late into the night about names, about what kind of parents they wanted to be, about how they would protect this child and give them every opportunity. "Boy or girl, it doesn't matter," Samuel said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "As long as you're both healthy, that's all I care about. We need names for both possibilities," Catherine said practically. "I like Thomas for a boy after my father. He wasn't perfect, but he tried to understand me in his way." "Thomas is good," Samuel agreed, "and for a girl." "Rose," Catherine said, "for your mother, you said she was kind and strong, and those are the qualities I hope our daughter will have." "Rose Catherine Hart," Samuel said, testing the name. "That's beautiful." The summer passed peacefully, and Catherine felt more connected to the land, and the life they were building with each passing day. She helped Samuel in small ways with the horses, took walks in the meadows picking wildflowers, wrote long letters to her family in Boston describing her happiness. Her mother wrote back, still disapproving but softening slightly now that Catherine was married and expecting. And Catherine found she could read those letters without pain, secure in the knowledge that she had made the right choices. November arrived cold and clear, and on a night when the stars seemed close enough to touch, Catherine's labor began. Samuel rode for the doctor and Martha Dawson while Catherine breathed through the contractions, frightened but determined. She thought of Sarah, Samuel's first wife, and sent up a prayer that history would not repeat itself. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Samuel stayed by her side, holding her hand, wiping her brow, whispering encouragement even though she could see the fear in his eyes. Martha and the doctor worked efficiently, and when Catherine thought she could not possibly endure anymore when she was ready to give up, she heard the doctor say, "One more push, Catherine. Your baby's almost here." She gathered every ounce of strength she had left and pushed, and suddenly there was a cry, sharp and strong, filling the room. Catherine collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted, and heard the most beautiful words she could imagine. "It's a boy," the doctor said. "A healthy, strong boy." Samuel was crying openly, and when the doctor placed the baby in Catherine's arms, wrapped in one of the blankets Martha had knitted, she looked down at her son and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known possible. He had a shock of dark hair and his father's blue eyes, and when he grasped her finger with his tiny hand, Catherine knew that this was what everything had been leading to. "Thomas Samuel Hart," she said softly. "Welcome to the world, little one." Samuel leaned over them both, his hand gentle on the baby's head. "He's perfect," he whispered. "You're perfect, both of you. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for giving me this, for giving me hope again." The weeks after Thomas's birth were a blur of sleepless nights and overwhelming love. Samuel was a devoted father, changing diapers and walking the floor with the baby when he cried, singing soft lullabies in his deep voice. Catherine recovered slowly, grateful for Martha's help, and the steady stream of women from town who brought food and offered assistance. As winter settled in around them, the little family found its rhythm. Catherine would nurse Thomas while Samuel read aloud from the newspapers or books, his voice a constant comfort. They took turns getting up in the night, supporting each other through the exhaustion of new parenthood. And through it all, their love for each other deepened, strengthened by the shared experience of creating this new life. "I never thought I'd have this again," Samuel said one night as he held Thomas, the baby sleeping peacefully against his chest. "A family, a future." "You gave that back to me, Catherine. We gave it to each other," Catherine said, leaning against his shoulder. "I was so lost when I came here, so sure that I was somehow fundamentally flawed. You showed me that the things I thought were weaknesses could be strengths in the right place, with the right person." "Your voice was never a weakness," Samuel said firmly. "It was just misunderstood by people who didn't matter. Out here with people who do matter, it's exactly right." The years that followed were full and rich. Thomas grew into a bright, curious toddler, and when he was 2, Catherine found herself pregnant again. This time, a daughter joined their family, and they named her Rose just as they had planned. Rose had her mother's dark hair and her father's spirit, fearless and strong even as a baby. Catherine returned to teaching when the children were old enough, bringing them with her to the schoolhouse where they played quietly while she taught. The children of Silver Creek adored them, and Thomas and Rose grew up surrounded by learning and love. Samuel's ranch prospered, and they added on to the house, building more rooms for their growing family. When Thomas was 5 and Rose was 3, Catherine became pregnant a 3rd time. The pregnancy was more difficult than the first 2, and she spent much of it resting while Samuel juggled the ranch work and caring for the older children. But in the spring of 1879, she gave birth to twin boys, James and William, and their family felt complete. 5 children, Samuel said, looking somewhat dazed as he held both twins while Catherine recovered. "We have 5 children, Catherine, and they're all perfect," Catherine said with tired satisfaction. "Our family, Samuel, everything we dreamed of." The children grew and thrived in the clear mountain air. Thomas proved to be a natural with horses like his father, spending every spare moment in the corrals learning to train and care for them. Rose was a voracious reader like her mother, always with a book in her hands, asking endless questions. The twins were mischievous and inseparable, getting into trouble with regularity, but always with such charm that it was hard to stay angry. Catherine continued teaching, becoming one of the most respected educators in the county. Many of her students went on to higher education, some becoming teachers themselves, others doctors or lawyers or successful ranchers. She took pride in every success, in knowing that she had played a part in shaping these young lives. And through it all, Samuel was her constant support, attending school programs, helping with difficult students, showing up for her just as she showed up for him. The years brought challenges as well as joys. There were harsh winters that tested their endurance, droughts that made water scarce and crops difficult. One year, a fire swept through part of Samuel's grazing land and they lost several horses. They weathered these trials together, their love providing a foundation that held firm no matter what storms came. Samuel's niece Emma, who had been one of Catherine's first students, grew into a fine young woman and eventually married a banker from Sacramento. She named her first daughter Catherine, in honor of the teacher who had made such a difference in her life. Little things like that reminded Catherine that the choices she had made, the courage it had taken to leave Boston and start over, had rippled out in ways she could never have imagined. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Samuel took Catherine back to the spot where they had first kissed, the steps of the old schoolhouse. The building had been replaced with a larger structure as the town grew, but the location remained the same. 10 years, Samuel said, holding both her hands. A decade of loving you, Catherine Hart, and I love you more now than I did the day we married. I love you too, Catherine said. You saved me, Samuel. You saw me when I thought I was invisible, heard me when I thought my voice was all wrong. You gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams. We saved each other, Samuel corrected gently. We built this life together, brick by brick, day by day, and I want to keep building it with you for the next 10 years and the 10 after that, and for however long we're given. They kissed there in the fading light, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something beautiful out of broken pieces. Around them, Silver Creek went about its evening routines, a town that had grown and prospered, a community that had embraced them both. The children grew older, and one by one, they began to make their own paths in the world. Thomas took over more and more of the ranch operations, as Samuel's hair turned gray and his body began to feel the years of hard work. Rose went east to attend college, one of the first women from Silver Creek to do so, and came back with a degree in literature and plans to open a bookshop in town. The twins remained close, eventually starting a freight business together that served the entire county. Through it all, Catherine and Samuel remained the center of the family, the steady presence that everyone could rely on. They celebrated grandchildren's births and wedding anniversaries, weathered losses and disappointments, and continued to love each other with a depth that only grew with time. On a warm evening in the summer of 1897, as they sat on the porch of the ranch house watching the sun set over mountains that had become as familiar as old friends, Catherine reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She was 51 now, her dark hair streaked with silver, her hands showing the marks of a life lived fully. Samuel was 55, his face lined with years of sun and wind, but his eyes still held that same warmth that had drawn her to him from the first moment. "Do you ever regret it?" She asked suddenly. "Marrying me, tying yourself to a woman who came here as a stranger." Samuel turned to look at her, and the expression on his face was so full of love that Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. "Not for one single second," he said firmly. "You were never a stranger, Catherine. You were the missing piece I didn't even know I was looking for, and that voice that you thought was so wrong. I still love the sound of it. I could listen to you talk all day and never grow tired of it. It's rough and low and completely improper, Catherine said, but she was smiling. It's perfect for my ears, Samuel repeated the words he had said to her 25 years earlier. Then and now and always. Catherine moved closer to him, and they sat together in comfortable silence as the light faded from the sky. She thought about that frightened woman stepping off the stagecoach, convinced she would always be an outsider, always somehow wrong. She thought about the cowboy who had seen past surface judgments to the person beneath, who had offered his heart despite the pain of past losses. Their life together had not been without struggles, but every challenge had been met together, every joy shared and doubled. They had built a family, a home, a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. Catherine's voice, the thing she had once seen as her greatest flaw, had taught generations of children to read, had comforted her own babies through nightmares, had spoken vows of love that had never wavered. "Thank you," she said softly to Samuel. "For what?" He asked, his arm coming around her shoulders. "For hearing me," Catherine said, "for really hearing me, voice and all, and loving what you heard." "Always," Samuel promised and kissed her temple. "Always and forever." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Catherine leaned against her husband and felt the profound contentment of a life well lived. She had found her place in the Wild West, in a town called Silver Creek, with a man who had taught her that what others called flaws could be perfect in the right context. Their love story, born in dust and heat and the struggle to build new lives, had grown into something that would endure. The years continued to pass, bringing more grandchildren, more changes to Silver Creek as the frontier gave way to civilization. The railroad came through, bringing easier access to the outside world. Automobiles began to appear on the streets, strange mechanical contraptions that spooked the horses. The century turned, and a new era began, but some things remained constant. Samuel and Catherine grew old together, their love a touchstone for their children and grandchildren. They celebrated their 25th anniversary with a party that brought together friends and family from across the state. They marked their 30th anniversary quietly, just the two of them, with a horseback ride through the meadows where Samuel had first told Catherine he loved her. When Samuel's health began to fail in the summer of 1905, Catherine nursed him with the same tenderness he had shown her during her difficult pregnancies. Their children rallied around them, bringing comfort and support, but it was clear that Samuel's time was drawing to a close. He had lived a full life, 60 years that had been marked by both tragedy and tremendous joy, and he faced the end with the same quiet courage he had brought to everything. On a golden afternoon in September, with Catherine holding his hand and their children gathered around the bed, Samuel Hart drew his last breath. His eyes were on Catherine's face, and his last words were simple and true. "Perfect," he whispered. "Everything about you has always been perfect." Catherine's grief was deep and profound, but it was tempered by gratitude. She had been given 33 years with a man who had loved her completely, who had seen all of her, flaws and strengths alike, and chosen her every single day. She had built a life that mattered, raised children who were kind and strong, touched countless lives through her teaching. Samuel's death was not an ending but a transition, and she knew that what they had built together would continue. She lived for another 15 years, teaching until she was 65, watching her grandchildren grow and have children of their own. She wrote down the story of how she and Samuel had met, how a cowboy had changed her life with a simple statement about her voice, and passed those pages down to her daughters and granddaughters, a reminder that love could be found in the most unexpected places. On a spring morning in 1920, Catherine Wells Hart passed away peacefully in her sleep, in the house that she and Samuel had built together, surrounded by photographs of their life and the love that had sustained her. Her children laid her to rest beside Samuel in the cemetery on the hill overlooking Silver Creek, and on her headstone, they carved the words that had meant so much to both of them. Her voice was perfect for his ears, and his love was perfect for her heart. The town of Silver Creek grew and changed over the decades that followed, but the story of Catherine and Samuel remained, passed down through generations. It became a touchstone for the community, a reminder that true love sees past surface judgments to the heart beneath, that what the world calls flaws might be perfect strengths in the right context, that courage and kindness can build something lasting. The schoolhouse where Catherine taught was eventually replaced, but a plaque was placed on the site commemorating her contributions to education in the community. The Hart Ranch continued to thrive under the management of Thomas and his descendants, the horses that bore the Hart brand known throughout the state for their quality and temperament. Rose's bookshop became an institution in Silver Creek, a place where people gathered to discuss ideas and stories, carrying on Catherine's legacy of learning. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun set over the Sierra Nevada mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, people would remember the story of the Boston schoolteacher with the rough voice and the cowboy who loved the sound of it. They would remember that Silver Creek had been built not just by miners seeking gold, but by people seeking fresh starts, new chances, the opportunity to be seen for who they truly were. Catherine's voice, once thought improper for a lady, had taught hundreds of children to read and think and dream. It had spoken words of love to a man who needed to believe in second chances. It had sung lullabies to 5 children and countless grandchildren. It had told stories that inspired and comforted and challenged. And in the end, that voice that had caused her such pain in her youth became the instrument through which she changed the world, one word, one student, one moment of connection at a time. The legacy of Catherine and Samuel Hart was not measured in wealth or fame, but in the countless small ways they had touched lives and built community. It was in the children who learned to read because Catherine refused to give up on them, in the horses that carried riders safely because Samuel had trained them with patience and kindness, in the love that their children carried forward into their own marriages and families. As the years turned into decades and then into a new century, the specifics of their story became somewhat blurred, details lost to time. But the essential truth remained, that in a dusty mining town in California in 1872, a woman with a voice society deemed inappropriate had met a cowboy who heard only its beauty, and together, they had built something that endured long after they were gone. Their great-great-grandchildren still gathered at the ranch on holidays, still told stories about the remarkable woman who had come west alone and brave, still spoke of the cowboy who had seen past conventions to the treasure beneath. The house had been expanded and modernized, but the original structure remained at its core, a testament to the foundations Samuel and Catherine had laid. In the end, theirs was a simple story, really. 2 wounded people finding each other at just the right moment, building a life based on acceptance and love, raising a family, contributing to their community, and loving each other fiercely until death parted them. But simple does not mean unimportant, and the ripples of their love continued to spread outward, touching lives they would never meet, inspiring people who would never know their names. Catherine Wells had boarded a stagecoach in Boston believing she was running away from a life that didn't fit. Instead, she had run toward a destiny she could never have imagined, toward a love that would define her, toward a life that would matter in ways big and small. And Samuel Hart, broken by loss and war, had found healing in the arms of a woman whose imperfect voice spoke perfect truth. Their story was the story of the American West itself. Rough and beautiful, challenging and rewarding, built by people brave enough to leave behind what didn't work and create something new. It was a story of transformation, of finding home not in a place but in a person, of learning that what makes us different can be exactly what makes us right for someone else. And so the years passed, and Silver Creek grew from a rough mining town into a thriving community, and the Harts became woven into its very fabric. The story of how it all began, of a voice deemed improper and a cowboy who heard its perfection, remained a favorite tale, told and retold, adapted and embellished, but always carrying at its core a fundamental truth about love and acceptance and the courage to be yourself. Catherine and Samuel's love story proved that sometimes the most powerful romances are built not on grand gestures, but on steady presence, on seeing and being seen, on choosing each other day after day through all of life's challenges and joys. It proved that healing from past wounds is possible when you find someone willing to walk beside you through the process. It proved that home is not where you come from, but where you are loved completely, voice and all. Their children carried forward the lessons they had learned from watching their parents' marriage. That love requires work and commitment, that differences should be celebrated rather than condemned, that building something lasting takes patience and dedication. Thomas taught his own children to train horses with the same gentle patience his father had shown, always explaining that a harsh hand creates a broken spirit while kindness creates trust. Rose passed on her mother's love of learning, eventually establishing a scholarship fund for young women seeking education. The twins built their business on the principles of honesty and hard work they had learned at the ranch. The town of Silver Creek itself became a testament to what Catherine and Samuel had built. The emphasis on education that Catherine had championed led to the establishment of a high school and eventually a community college. The respect for honest work and treating people fairly, values Samuel had embodied, became part of the town's character. Young people who left for opportunities in bigger cities often returned, drawn by the sense of community and shared values. On the 100th anniversary of Catherine's arrival in Silver Creek, the town held a celebration. Her granddaughter, Catherine Rose Hart, now an elderly woman herself, stood before the assembled crowd and told the story that had been passed down through generations. She spoke of how her grandmother had stepped off a stagecoach carrying nothing but a trunk and a dream, how she had met a cowboy who changed everything with a few simple words, how together they had built not just a family but a foundation for an entire community. "My grandmother used to say that she came west to escape," Catherine Rose told the crowd. But what she found was that she had actually been running toward something all along, toward herself, toward love, toward a life that fit her in all the ways Boston never had. "And my grandfather, he used to say that the moment he heard her voice, he knew she was different. Different in the best possible way." The crowd listened, rapt, as Catherine Rose continued the story, speaking of courtship and marriage, of children raised and challenges overcome, of a love that had endured until death and beyond in memory and legacy. She spoke of her grandmother's impact on education in the county, of her grandfather's contributions to ranching practices and community building. But mostly, she spoke of love, simple and profound, between two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed. When she finished, there was a moment of silence and then applause erupted, heartfelt and warm. People wiped away tears, remembering their own love stories, their own journeys to finding home and belonging. And in that moment, Catherine and Samuel Hart's legacy was renewed for another generation, their story continuing to inspire and comfort and remind people of what truly matters. As the celebration continued into the evening, with music and dancing and the telling of other stories about Silver Creek's history, the sun set over the same mountains that had witnessed Catherine's arrival a century before. The light painted the sky in brilliant colors, gold and rose and deep purple, a reminder that beauty exists in transitions, in the space between what was and what will be. The Hart Ranch still stood 2 miles west of town, still raised horses, still bore the mark of the people who had founded it. The schoolhouse where Catherine had taught was now a museum, preserving the history of education in Silver Creek. And in the cemetery on the hill, 2 headstones stood side by side, weathered by time but still legible, marking the resting place of 2 people who had loved deeply and well. Their story was complete, A full circle from arrival to departure, from meeting to parting, from building to legacy. It was a story that had begun with uncertainty and fear, with a woman who thought herself flawed and a man afraid to risk his heart again. But it had become a story of triumph, of love conquering doubt, of two people creating something beautiful together. Catherine Wells and Samuel Hart had lived and loved in the Wild West during a time of transformation and possibility. They had faced challenges with courage, celebrated joys with gratitude, and loved each other with a constancy that became legendary. Their voices, his deep and steady, hers rough and honest, had blended together to create a harmony that still echoed through the generations. And so their story ends not with sadness, but with satisfaction, not with loss, but with the knowledge that what they built continues. Their love, born in the dust and heat of a California summer in 1872, proved strong enough to weather everything life threw at it and generous enough to bless countless others. It was, in every sense that mattered, perfect. Just as Catherine's voice had been perfect for Samuel's ears, their love had been perfect for each other's hearts, and their legacy was perfect for the community they helped to build. The Wild West may have been tamed, the frontier may have closed, but the spirit of that time, the courage and resilience and capacity for love that people like Catherine and Samuel embodied, lived on. Their story remained, a testament to the power of seeing past surface judgments to the truth beneath, of offering second chances, of building something lasting through daily commitment and unwavering love. And that, more than gold or fame or fortune, was the real treasure of the American West. The opportunity to become who you were always meant to be, to find the person who saw you clearly and loved you anyway, to build a life that mattered. Catherine had thought her voice made her unsuitable for proper society, but Samuel had heard in it everything he needed: honesty, strength, courage, and heart. Together, they had proven that perfect doesn't mean polished or refined or meeting arbitrary social standards. Perfect means right, means fitting, means complementary. Perfect means two broken pieces coming together to create something whole. Their story, told and retold through the years, remained a beacon for anyone who had ever felt like they didn't quite fit, for anyone who had been told they were somehow wrong, for anyone brave enough to start over in search of something better. It proved that love is not about finding someone perfect, but about finding someone whose imperfections complement your own, whose voice sounds like home, whose presence makes you brave enough to become who you were always meant to be. And so the tale of Catherine and Samuel Hart, the schoolteacher and the cowboy, the woman with the improper voice and the man who heard only its perfection, came to its natural conclusion. They had lived fully, loved deeply, and left behind a legacy that would endure for generations. Their story was complete, their circle closed, their love triumphant. And in the end, that was all anyone could hope for: a life well lived, a love well loved, and the knowledge that what you built would outlast you. The stars came out over Silver Creek, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss, their wedding, the births of their children, all the moments big and small that had made up their life together. And somewhere in that vast sky, perhaps two souls reunited, finally together again after years of separation, still loving, still perfect for each other's hearts. The end had come, as it must for all stories, but the love remained, eternal and unchanging, a testament to what two people could build when they had the courage to see each other clearly and love completely. Catherine's voice, Samuel's heart, their children, their legacy, all of it woven together into a story that would never truly end as long as there were people willing to listen, to learn, and to believe in the transformative power of love, perfect for his ears, perfect for her heart. Perfect in the end, in every way that mattered.